Welcome back to Left Anchor. I'm Alexi the Greek.
And I'm Ryan Cooper. Sorry we're a little late this time. We've been hustling and bustling. I've just moved to a new house and I've just finally got all of my computer junk set up. So I'm here in the take bunker and, podcast production has commenced once more, and the takes shall flow. They must flow.
Absolutely.
But yeah, anyway,
congrats, buddy, first of all. And,
thanks.
I just wanted to, but before we get to the episode, the audience can wait to celebrate a life change for you. You've moved to a different location. It's very exciting. You've got a new place that you now own and you're going to, work on and such. So just wanted to say, it's a new studio that you're coming in to the audience from and everything. So, how does it feel?
Well, it's a kind of a dump, to be honest. It's a funky house is what it is. It's a little bit of fixer-upper.
It needs some TLC. It needs some TLC.
Yeah, it needed to not be remodeled by the previous guy who owned it and did not know what the hell he was doing. And everything is wrong and bad. But, the bones of it are pretty good. And so we're just going to be making a lot of, improvements as we can afford them and whatnot. But
you, sir, are very good at dealing with people who don't know what the hell they're doing. In fact, this podcast is much about talking about people who don't know what the hell they're doing. So
it's true.
Without further ado, this is another newsy one, right? We've got some discourse to get into.
Some discourse and maybe a little bit of theory we could touch on. But before we get to that, I want to first just note, rest in peace, Tony Bennett, the famous, kind of Las Vegas singer type guy who is also, in a number of films and such over the years. Real, icon of the 20th century for sure. And I was reading a little Washington Post piece about how when he was in World War II over in Europe, he at one point had met a black fella. He was like 19 at the time, and he was in a combat battalion, and he just met a black friend of his who, he had been in like a quartet with, but, in years previously. And they're like, hey, how you doing? And sat down. They were going to have Thanksgiving dinner together, only for this officer to come up because the military was segregated at the time, and chewed him out and cut off his corporal stripes and stamped on them. This is how fucking racist everybody was back then, except not Tony Bennett. He decided that from that day forward, he was going to be a pacifist and an anti-racist. And he was one of the big time supporters of the civil rights movement and the kind of entertainment industry. A real mensch. And then he later was in the Battle of the Bulge, saw some hard fighting. That was a tough battle.
Right.
And decided he wanted to be a pacifist after that. So, rest in peace. Yeah. Great voice too. Really just a rich, mellifluous. That's always a great word.
That's the word. That is a great word. Yeah. Well, hopefully we can toss in a little clip of his beautiful voice.
The loveliness of Paris seems somehow sadly gay. The glory that was Rome is of another day. Well, I was terribly alone and forgotten in Manhattan. I'm going home to my city by the bay. I left my heart in San Francisco. High on a hill.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and he passed not too long after Harry Belafonte, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah, another icon.
Another.
But
a lot of loss recently, but it's worth remembering them for all they did, and hopefully they can inspire future legends, right?
Yeah, I don't know how old he was. I think he was in his 90s or late 80s.
Bennett, I think like 94, Tony Bennett, I think.
Yeah. There's a phrase in the Bible, I forget exactly what it's like, he died old and full of years. It's
oh, nice.
It's always this tragedy to see someone go, but it's like you really can't ask for more than that. Having had such a great career and such a long life and such great success.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Farewell, Mr. Bennett.
Yeah, farewell indeed. I love the idea that grief is a form of praise, and this in some way could kind of explain grieving for somebody you didn't know personally, because of course there's plenty of praise that explains personal losses and relationships that people have personally and family and friends and so forth. But I think there is real grief in the loss of an icon like that, because I think the work that he did in his life did touch people he didn't know personally in a way that is worthy of their particular praise of him, right? And I think that makes a lot of sense to me, to kind of feel something for people like that when they pass, right? Not just kind of symbolically, but actually we feel it too in our hearts, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's someone, I wouldn't say I was a huge Tony Bennett fan necessarily, but, it's like he meant a little something to me, and it's just a human connection, even if it's entirely one directional in this case. But, that's
and I'll also remember his duet with Amy Winehouse. I don't know if you remember that. Shortly before she passed. That was a real tragic passing, right? Like a life cut off way too quickly. And she had a lot of soul. She also, did. And I don't know how we transition from that to the banana discourse, but we have to. So it's just, there's no easy way to transition from that to the bananas.
Will our future, musical singers, and stage actors and whatnot be able to eat? I looked up the average per capita U.S. consumption of bananas is 26.87 pounds as of 2021, which actually doesn't seem like that much. I don't know. Per person per year? Is that what that is? How many bananas is that for an average banana? You told me the weight, but I don't know. Maybe like half a pound.
So we're talking 50 bananas a year. We're talking a banana a week for the average person.
Yeah, something roughly like that. Yeah, that would be my guess at least. And presumably there's like a distribution. You have some people who are having like 10 bananas a day, and then some people who
it might be like guns, where like the same 10 people own all the guns. It might be like that with bananas. Maybe some people just eat bananas all the time.
Jeff Bezos is eating a banana right now.
Okay, so for those who don't know what the hell we're talking about, we should back up a little bit. Right?
Yeah. This is a very silly, discourse, I think mainly on Twitter, but there's also an article written about it by Eric Levitz in New York Magazine. Basically Malcolm Harris and a number of folks, Malcolm Harris is like a sort of historian. He wrote the book Palo Alto. And there's another one about millennials. I forget what it's called. But
he's also a good activist in Philly. He does really good work. A fellow traveler, as it were, a communist, and a good writer. Yeah,
his book Palo Alto got great reviews. It's supposed to be pretty excellent. But yeah, so he was making the case that basically there can't and there won't be a sort of global distribution system of bananas. He said, Americans can no longer expect the world to produce and harvest 10 billion pounds of bananas per year for us alone. That is 30 pounds of bananas per person. So it's not quite that much in reality. But it's sort of,
so specifically, it was specifically about American current consumption standards under communism, right? Under global socialism, the expectation that, and again, sometimes a banana is not just a banana, but I think it wasn't just about the bananas, but the idea that like American consumption levels will not change is something that needs to be kind of, let go of. By leftists,
right.
Basically.
It was a weird, we just had some great discourse, really just people popping rivets in the brain. But it was such a strange jumping off point for this particular point that I think that, is a charitable reading of what he was trying to get at. That Americans consume too much resources, basically. Like there's no possible way you could have a fair, distribution of consumption and resources across the world if Americans keep using so much. But bananas are almost entirely unrelated to that. It's like a rounding error in terms of the global economy and in terms of resource consumption. I did a little bit of digging on this because I was kind of curious. It's is the bananas economy all about growing and then shipping to the United States? And the answer is not really. There are apparently something like 153 million metric tons of bananas produced every year, mostly in India and China, though also Central and South America. Ecuador is a major banana exporter, but only 21 million tons are exported. So the vast majority of bananas are grown for
locally.
Yeah, for local consumption, which makes sense because they're cheap to grow. They don't require much but in the way of resources to harvest. They're fairly easy. And it's a staple food in a lot of countries, for that very reason. They're fairly healthy and fairly, nutrient rich. And they don't of course, it's like in any sort of global monocrop agriculture, there's a lot of pesticides and fertilizer that are used, and that's really not great ecologically speaking.
Harmful to workers.
To
consumers. Yeah.
But it really, it's if you're trying to make this point, I guess, what I would say is it should be about meat and cheese and in terms of food.
The funny thing is, literally, I thought you were being metaphorical again with the meat, but actual meat and no, but it's a good jumping off point, and for me, it is interesting to think about, the current state of supply chains and exports and which products are locally consumed. But I don't really think that's what the discussion, because what happened was the kind of side taking that immediately flowed and that kind of insults and jabs and arguments obviously weren't about bananas, right? Obviously it wasn't about this kind of empirical question of the challenges involved and how much harm does it do to the ecology. What it's really about, I think, is what does one's vision of the future under socialism or post-capitalism look like? What does that entail? And how do you pitch that to people? And how does that relate to the needs of people suffering under capitalism now? And so there's a lot of things to unpack there, but you have legitimate differences that are substantial and interesting, and tensions that Levitz points out in his piece. But I think, a banana is not just a banana. So we could kind of talk about it as in cases, like you say, like meat or cheese or whatever, in cases where there are these tensions that are real, and we can't just promise that everything will look exactly the same, but just without all the bad exploitation, et cetera, right? How should we think about these differences, right? And how can we lay out what the people fighting with each other over bananas were actually trying to argue about, right?
That's the end of the preview, folks. As usual, we like to mention that this podcast is sponsored by the American Prospect magazine. So if you want to listen to the whole thing, you could subscribe at $5 a month if you want that, plus a free subscription to the website, plus the opportunity for a steeply discounted print subscription. You can do that if you so wish at $10 a month. And otherwise, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.